Hey there, everybody. What's up? Dr. Craig Engstrom here, but you can just call me Craig because we are all just professionals trying to improve our talent. And in fact, today's video is about talent development. So I'm going to be talking today about communities of practice because one of my colleagues, not that I specifically work with, but that I am in a community of practice with, recently had a publication with the Association for Talent Development on the topic of communities of practice. And she published this in TD Work, which, by the way, is one of the 3 things that I recommend that you study if you are trying to crush the Certified Professional in Talent Development case study questions. Now, on this channel, I cover a wide range of topics related to improving your talent, which could mean that you're watching videos on how to be a better communicator, how to be a better public speaker, how to use Canva or PowerPoint better for your presentations, or generally how to use software or techniques that improve your instruction or training. So if that all sounds interesting to you, you might as well subscribe. But if you're just interested in communities of practice, you might as well hit the like button right now because you're going to like what I have to share with you today. And that is some outtakes from the Talent Development or TD Work magazine. And again, TD at Work is just a really great publication that I can't recommend enough, especially for those of you in the workplace that want some actionable and useful information, but especially for those of you that are studying for the CPTD examination. Now, this was written, as I said, by a colleague that I have gotten to know. We met actually at the Association for Talent Development's headquarters while we were doing some examination review for the APTD exam, and she says that she's a trusted talent development advocate and advisor dedicated to fostering a culture of continuous learning, and I would say that is correct. She took the initiative to set up our discussion group, and it's been awesome. Once a month, we meet, we being a group of talent development professionals, and discuss what's going on in our workplaces, and we're from all over the map. Some of us are in like more corporate settings, some of us are in more warehouse settings, some of us are in more manufacturing settings, and some of us are in educational settings like myself. And she says she believes in embracing, developing, and amplifying strengths while aligning. So great triple there. Good use of the rule of 3s, embracing, developing, and amplifying. So way to go, Maggie. All right, so she says, and again, I'm not going to go through everything in this magazine. It's a 20-page magazine. I'm going to keep this brief. I'm just going to hit some of my key takeaways. And of course, I need to do that because I think it would probably violate copyright if I, went through everything. But I hope that you will go and download it. In fact, it's free for ATD members, and it's only $19 for those who would like to buy it that are non-members, and I think it's worth it, as you will see. When I get to the back end, there's some actual like worksheets and stuff that you can use in trainings or in your workplace. All right, so she starts out the saying, hey, peer learning is the way to go. It's how we learn like 80% of the time or 70% of the time, she says. And you can just look at like social networking sites where you can learn how to season dishes or learn a new dance or learn how to be a better talent development professional, instructor, or just professional in general by watching YouTube videos and participating in discussions, which, by the way, is why you should leave not only 1 comment, but 2 comments. And definitely help out the algorithm, because I think that I'm providing some useful information. Now, she goes in and provides the 4 things that she's going to be covering in this issue, and she says that she's going to review the different peer learning methods, highlight how COPs work and their organizational benefits, so she really does make a good case for them, discuss methods of creating, maintaining, and encouraging COPs, and outlining best practices or successful COPs, Now, she goes through the different peer learning methods from mentorship, project teams, and then lands on community of practice. If you don't know what this is, it's a group of individuals who share a concern or a passion for something they do and want to learn how to do it better via regular interactions. So again, ideally, this might be a practice-based group, but discussions themselves that are driven by topics of practice can also be COPs. Now, she says to think of them as focused interest clubs for expanding members' thinking around ways of working in the area of practice. COPs engage experts to surface and exchange information, and I love this analogy she gives here, like a boiling pot where bubbles rise from different areas. So you might be able to provide useful information where someone else provides useful information, and so forth. It kind of reminds me of the garbage can model of decision making, where you have a person that's looking for problems that they know they have the solution for. It's kind of a consulting model, if you will. And so you look for problems, you identify the problems, maybe you find lots of problems, but you only point out the problems that you have the solution for. But the nice thing is when you are all COPs, then you might be really recognizing the problems and still have solutions for them. So that's a case for that. I just love the analogy. It made me think of a lot of different things, obviously. Okay, so she says that these individuals in about 2002 coined the term community of practice. And I would say that's probably accurate for talent development, but this is one area where I put a question mark because, in fact, as early as the early 1990s, there was discussions of community of practice in fields of leadership and even as a focus area for what's called ethnography or the study of people's behaviors. So I don't know if they coined the term, but they might have coined the term in talent development. And it's not nitpicking here. I'm just, I guess doing my scholarly thing. I am an academic, I guess, at heart. But other than that, that's the only kind of like question mark I had throughout this whole article. I think it was great. Okay, so going down here, you can say that, however, just because individuals gather together does not make them a community of practice. Community of practices gather for long-term growth, development, and application in their fields. 3 elements differentiate them from other group gatherings, which are domain, practitioners, and community. So I'll let you read about all of that, but just gives you a general sense that just because people are hanging out together does not make them COPs. I think what makes our group, even though it's online and just discussing a COP, is we are sharing ideas for how to improve things in our workplaces or in the talent development profession broadly. So she says that you may also need to establish a COP around a specific topic. So I think that's kind of a defining characteristic of them. And one thing I love about TD at Work, as I said, is that it does cover case studies, usually gives you some case study examples, gives you a problem, explains some solutions, some results that were outcomes. So all of this is good information if you are taking the CPTD exam and have case study questions. It just kind of does give you some useful information, some very practical information. So I think one of the key takeaways from this issue of TD at Work is how to establish a COP if this is something that interests you. So she says, like, if you're going to establish it, there are things that you need to do organizationally, and she goes into a lot of details on them after she covers the benefits. But if you're going to have them, people have to come into a COP with an open mind. So I think that's really important. They have to be willing to engage each other. So they might have their established ways of working, but they still need to be open to other people's ideas, or it'll quickly shut down the COP. You need to have it kind of look like or function as an open system, and the best way to kill an open system is to exhaust the air out of it, to close off avenues for new inputs from somebody who basically doesn't want to have an open mind and sort of takes over. And goes on to say, individuals sharing successes and ways they effectively navigate challenges leads to more experimenting with their methods, increased education, calculated risk-taking, and learning from failures. So what can happen is you have a network of people who are assisting you and making you feel more comfortable taking some risks that the organization might need. I also think what this is saying is that it builds up your credibility. Really, to be credible, people have to give you that credibility. They have to see you as that. And so being in a community is one of the best ways to build credibility. People just don't naturally have credibility. It's how the audience observes them. So definitely liked this quotation there. Gives a lot of really great thing on motivating learners and how to motivate them. Again, a very good case study question. So one thing I might throw out in the chat just to get it going is, during an organizational needs assessment, a learning leader discovered that less experienced employees frequently interrupted a handful of experienced workers to ask questions, leading to frustration and decreased productivity for the veteran employees. So before reading the solution, I guess you could pause the video there and read it, but before reading that solution, write in the comments what you think you would do in that circumstance. And that's a great way to build case study discussion and to get other ideas from your community that might not be answered specifically in this issue. Just because it's answered in this issue doesn't necessarily mean it's the only way to resolve a problem. Okay, so getting into here, like one thing that she really emphasizes, and this is one of my key takeaways, I think all of the information provided is useful, but I think one thing that it needs to be in mind when creating a community of practice is preparation. And preparation, I think, will ultimately lead to avoiding scope creep, which is something that can come up as a issue, as she points out later in this issue. So basically, she says that a lot of people have had training in public speaking, right? You can do a needs assessment and so forth, but good preparation is going to create an opportunity for people to basically attend to the issues that they have in the context in which they are having them. So in this case, she gives an example of how to help people become better presenters by actually pairing them with some coaches. Just sending people to more workshops on public speaking might not make them better presenters. So she gives a really good example here about how preparation can actually lead to better quality design. That better quality design improves the community of practice. She says that it's important to gauge interest in it, just not throw people into a community of practice or enforce it. In fact, she says one of the biggest ways to kind of kill it is to make it mandatory, or sort of make it just, something we ought to do versus something more organic. She does say that, hey, if you're going to be developing these, here's some key frameworks. I liked my key ones were keep it simple and be inclusive. And as I was reading and going through the various ways to cultivate practice, so again, you'll have to download and read these. One thing that came to mind was this really great book, Dream Teams, and I'm going to put, I think it's by Shane Snow, but I'm going to put a link in the description. I highly recommend, if you're interested in creating a community of practice, to get that book. It definitely hits on all of the things about being open and being inclusive, and why inclusive is critical to building quality teams. I just love that book, Dream Teams. In fact, for almost every class over the past couple of years, I've assigned students mandatory reading for that, or every once in a while, optional reading, but highly recommend that. So anyway, I have all those checked off more for my own sort of knowledge, but I'm not going to go into detail on them here. I did like what she had to talk about with in terms of virtual engagement and collaboration. Definitely something that is on people's minds, so you should definitely read this to get a sense of how ideas for building a community of practice in the virtual environment. I think you should stop by one of our discussions, get an invite from somebody on the team. It could be me, it could be Maggie. Come to one of our discussions and see how a virtual discussion unfolds. It's a lot of fun, and I think you would see that. Now, one of the biggest challenges is the scope creep, which is essentially where a team is formed, a community of practice gets going, and then over time, what they're focused on sort of like changes. It creeps into something else. And so one way to do this is to define what participants should do and when they actually suspect scope creep. Okay, so what are the protocols, and putting into place some procedures for addressing it. Because if you don't do that, then people might avoid conflict, or they might not know what to do procedurally. It could be as simple as, hey, if you start to think that we're talking about something that's going to take us in another direction, raise your hand and you're given the opportunity to speak about it. So just encouraging and inviting feedback, of course, is one way to do that. Now, another thing that I was just thinking about here when it came to scope creep and design is that you need to be conscientious that, people need time to actually build relationships. So there's actually been studies, and if I can find it, I'll put it in the description. But when you have teams that actually spend time building emotional connections, they're higher performers than those that just get started on the project right away. So definitely having some time to build procedures and processes and connections emotionally with the team is important, or else you're just going to end up with what's feeling like a mandated sort of practice. So she gives you, that it should be voluntary. And one way to keep people feeling that it's voluntary is really to point out sort of what's intrinsically motivating them, but not forcing them into commitment, but reminding them of the successes that are outcomes of being in a community of practice and how it's benefited them. So I just really love a lot of her ideas and solutions in this article. Another kind of really cool thing that I thought she said is that you need to periodically take stock of the participants' comfort and confidence and establish trends in improvement throughout the COP's lifespan, as well as relevance to their daily work, improvement in competence, and increased in participation. Use that information to share with leaders and to recruit members. So again, you have to sort of emphasize and, I think advocate for the community of practice. take stock of your accomplishments and not just be totally focused on work. I think one of the things for me that makes a community of practice is that it is a work group doing all the things that Maggie points out, but has an emotional connection for sure. Okay, so I'm just going to point out that in these TD at Works, usually at the back, they have some really good tools and resources. They have recommended books, as you saw that I was scrolling through there. And so you really should check it out. I highly recommend you download these and use them. If you're a member of TD or ATD, I highly recommend you become a member. This is one great resource that you get for free. Otherwise, you're going to be paying $20 and you don't want to be doing that. Now, you might notice that I've switched my camera and about halfway through, I kind of zoomed in there so that you were only watching the PDF. And that is because my camera died and I didn't realize it. So anyway, I hope that you enjoyed this video. I do hope that you will give some accolades to my colleague, Maggie Romanovich, and I hope that you will consider subscribing to my channel. Would definitely love to build a community of practice with all of you that have been watching. Until the next video, I hope that you have a wonderful day.